Georgia is on fire, and realistically, this is something that, despite the potential concerns, isn't that big a deal. So, of course, if you stay until the very end, I will explain exactly how the new protests in Georgia and how the new problems don't necessarily impact my thesis on Georgia, and why I'm really not concerned about these new protests. Hello, and welcome back to the Traveling Report. Today we're going over Georgia and how there is new protests that may impact your international business or structure, although not really. And of course, if you are looking forward to this sort of content and you want to see more of it, feel free to subscribe in the description down below or on the channel. Of course, I appreciate it. It only takes a few seconds. Diving into the video, Georgia has long been protesting for longer than most people realize. The protests started in realistically what was over a year ago with the start of the Foreign Agents Law, and it has not stopped since. Every single day, every single week, every single month, there's a new protest, and Georgians don't quit at the protest. However, it really isn't as destabilizing as people think it is, as the stability of Georgia does not hinge on people protesting. And in fact, often when there is protests, like in the Rose Revolution, or whatever else, that is a sign of more stability to come. Georgia has a long-standing tradition of peaceful protests and less than peaceful protests, but it is largely contained within a specific area. So, for instance, the presidential palace was recently a large grounds for protest movements, and of course, I wouldn't recommend getting involved with the protests. Not because I necessarily don't understand or don't hear what Georgians are saying, but because realistically you can get arrested, and there is no real upside as a foreigner. Of course, when you come to Georgia, you'll see that most of it is largely calm. Most of the country isn't really impacted at all by these protests. It is just a specific area of Tbilisi, and not even all of Tbilisi is insane. And it used to be a lot larger. It used to be much more people, which it has died down quite substantially due to attrition from the government. Additionally, hundreds of people have been arrested, and so a lot of it is through dispersion tactics that people are stopping the protests. Of course, it's not any less safe than it was last year. And additionally, people are, I would say, a little bit less political now this year than last year, which creates an interesting dynamic where people have more of an acceptance to foreigners. That said, of course, I'll go into it in another video, but foreigners are not accepted in large parts in this society. Of course, I'll go into that specifically in depth in another video. But realistically, if you expect to be accepted without having a Georgian wife or having some form of blood ties to this country, you are probably sorely mistaken. However, the protests against the government largely are peaceful. They largely are people not being too destructive, albeit some of them are riots, some of them are destructive. However, it is in a very specific area that realistically no one gets hurt that badly, unless we're speaking on the police, where they do hurt protesters. and that's another reason why you shouldn't go to these protests, because the police are brutal. However, of course, living here is totally normal, and spending time here is not as bad as people would think. And as I read the news, I see that it's sensationalized, much to the demise of Georgians, as tourism is 25% of GDP, and foreign direct investment is an additional amount of GDP. And so what you get is an economy that is very fragile and growing due to private debt, not even public debt, but private debt. And realistically, I think that as time goes on, we'll see a lot less stability, but right now at least, there's quite substantial stability, and people are able to live their lives day to day, which of course makes things easier to deal with and easier to control within Georgia. And of course, as I spend more time here, I recently extended my stay due to some technical issues, but I'll be off to Pakistan here soon. I had to skip Armenia and Dubai, but that's life. But of course, I will go back, and that's not an issue. However, of course, as I spend time here, there is a sense of unease as well, and it does help to stay in a place where you know people, where things aren't going to get too bad. Of course, I don't believe that there will be a time where Georgia is super violent again, although I cannot completely write that off, but I don't believe Georgians are violent anymore. But I suppose in this regard, we will have to wait and see as to what happens, and I will be the first one to tell you exactly the updates, as I believe that many people within the internationalization space sensationalize Georgia, and they think of it as all goods, which I love this country, but there's more dark sides to it as well. Of course, with that said, if you like this video, feel free to like it. If you really liked this video, feel free to share it with your friends. If you are looking for one-on-one consulting to get out of the craziness of the world, feel free to contact me one-on-one, absolutely free, in the description down below. There's a Calendly link. You can click through to that and get free consulting. If you want to join me on this journey of internationalization and globalization, feel free to subscribe. This has been the Travel Report, signing off.